the way that she's dealt with her cancer has been entirely different. We know far less about it. It was kept, away from public scrutiny for a long period of time, and we haven't seen much of her. What do you think about the difference in them dealing with their illnesses?
Well,
they
I
are
think
public figures. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that there was a period where Kate, clearly, where people were saying what's wrong with her, and the trolls were inventing all sorts of falsehoods. And I think the palace played it appallingly at that stage and landed her with that dreadful situation where she did the Photoshop photograph, which was just a tragedy and self-inflicted wound. They could have avoided all that if they'd only been, they thought far more carefully about it. Well, the trouble is she's a mother. She's clearly very ill. It has been a huge shock for her because she's so young, and cancer amongst young people has a terrible record compared to older people. So she rightly feared for her own life and for her children. So I do think, we all saw at Wimbledon, she was terrific and rightly huge applause for her. But it does, again, it poses a great challenge and it poses an existential threat. And that's, again, at these times where the one thing which is secure in the British way of life is the monarchy. And whatever happens in politics or tragedies like COVID, the rock-solid existence of Britain is its identification with its monarchy. And at the moment, of course, that is a problem because of their illnesses.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm just wondering, on just going back to Rebel Prince, just a thought jumped into my head. If you were to rewrite that book now, Rebel King, as you referenced earlier to call it Rebel King, would you paint a more favourable portrait of Charles?
No, not at all.
No.
I mean, the Charles I describe is the real Charles. I think he then changed, he had to. But I think his relationship with Michael Fawcett, his aide, his relationship then previously in the trial of Paul Burrell, Diana's aide, accused of stealing all her possessions, his attitude towards his own staff, many of whom were very, very angry with him because of his disloyalty, his relationship with architects and things like that, all of that was true at the time. And I think damaged the image of the royal family. And most of all, of course, his relationship with money, which he needed to raise for his charities, which presented huge conflicts of interest, which his own father warned him about, which he ignored. And now, of course, he has to take into account.
Well, he did say on his, when he had his accession speech or when he was at Buckingham Palace that he will have to change and has to, give up certain parts of his role. Now he's no longer the Prince of Wales. So I think a lot of the things that you go into heavy detail in there, he has to leave behind.
He does.
He's now king.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he's fitted into that role. But I think there's a weariness as well about him. I think that whereas he was a rebel, he liked provoking and he liked causing trouble. I think now he's more interested in survival and having a quieter life. There are various anecdotes in that book which one can't imagine him now repeating.
Well, there may be a frustration. I mean, there may be a frustration that he can't do as king what he could do as Prince of Wales.
He's a man of 75.
Yeah.
He's finally happy in the sense that he's got his wife and then stricken with illness.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a resignation. I think there is a battle for survival. And in the end, you see, the thing about Charles is he wants there to be a Carolingian era. He'd love there to be buildings or train lines or something named after him. At the moment, he's just got one postbox with his name on it. And it's very frustrating for an intelligent and very sensitive man who wants to make his mark on history, that it's to some extent limited.
Well, I say, I've really come around to him, the more and more that I actually do work on him. And the jobs that I go to, the amount of people that actually want to come out and see, and I find they want to come out and see the king. So that's always the thing. Do they want to come out and see Charles, or do they want to come out? That's the king over there. And he's no longer the Prince of Wales. He's no longer Rebel Prince. He is the king. And I've sensed a change in his personality. But
well, absolutely. The point is, we're monarchists on the majority. And of course, we don't just see the man. And he is very good with people. There's no doubt. And he does take a real interest when he's talking to people about what they believe in, who they are, and all the rest of it. He has a genuine interest, and that's terrific about him. But in the end, people want to see the institution, and there's a sort of magical mystery about him in that sense.
One new friend he does have is David Beckham. And so, obviously, your latest book, or most recent book, House of Beckham, talks about the former England captain, absolute legend in the UK. But one element in the book was the falling out with Harry and Meghan. We often got whispers and wind that there was something going on because they were friends. David Beckham was an ambassador for the Invictus Games. Tell us what you found out about that relationship.
Well, I think what happened was that Meghan had a habit of having freebies. She liked everything given to her when she was an actress in Canada, and she wanted freebies from Victoria Beckham's fashion line. And the palace said to her, you can't do that. And there was a sort of frisson about that. And then she did get some advice on makeup, and she thought it was confidential. Somehow it got leaked to the press. She blamed the Beckhams for doing it. There was a very unfortunate telephone conversation when Harry accused David Beckham of leaking this help on the makeup. Victoria was furious because she hadn't leaked it, and they all became very, very messy. And then he's invited to Sydney for the Invictus Games by Harry, and he goes to Sydney with his wife and family. They leave England under very, very unfortunate circumstances where there's big question marks about the state of the Beckhams' marriage. And David turns up in Sydney at the stadium to meet Harry and be photographed at the Invictus Games, and is snubbed, is effectively told that Harry doesn't want to see him, having flown all the way around the world. That again, I mean, it shows bizarre behaviour by the Sussexes. The Beckhams have to swallow it. It is all just pretty odd.
Is this another example of the ghosting that we were talking about earlier, where people become friends with Harry and Meghan, then for whatever happens, they suddenly just turn their back on them?
Yes, it would, except that then, clearly they made up, because Meghan turns up at Westminster Abbey at a Commonwealth Day service wearing one of Victoria's clothes, right, which one assumes she got free or something. But I mean, it just shows you the level of the relationship between these so-called celebrities. Everything in the end comes down to money and mutual appreciation and mutual back-scratching.
What can we read into the fact that David Beckham, no longer friends with Harry and Meghan, has now aligned himself with the King? Is that the direction of travel for other superstars, not just superstars, but kind of world leaders or movers and shakers in the world? Is that where other people will start heading?
Well, not start, they always have. I mean, to appear in a photograph with the King has always been a sort of a big plus sign. And of course, for Beckham, who is desperate always to get his knighthood and be part of the establishment, the photograph of him with the King was worth a lot. I mean, I wouldn't put it as much as friendship. I think there's a mutual interest in all this. I think the King will find Beckham not the greatest ally. He won't get him any money. But on the other hand, for Beckham, it looks good because he's standing next to the King. But then many people stand next to the King. So I don't think it's anything remarkable at all.